This morning is taken from Ephesians chapter 4 and can be found on page 1175. Ephesians chapter 4, this is Paul writing. As a prisoner for the Lord, then I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. And to each one of us grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. Amen.
So we're going to talk about humility today. And I chose this picture of bare feet on the ground because that's what the word humility comes from. It has to do, the Latin root of the word has to do with the earth, the ground. It's having our feet on the ground. It's sort of the opposite of self-exalting, self-determining, self-inflated, which usually comes from a sort of quite a low self-esteem. And humility is one of those things that has been sort of highly esteemed at some point in history and very much ditched in moments in history. In the past, people weren't sort of saying, oh, that's great, he's a very humble person. It's actually the opposite of that. People are like, the more humble you are, the less important you are. Like, people weren't looking to be humble. But there's been quite a sort of shift in the last 100 years with that. Especially during the world wars, there's quite a shift on people actually suddenly realizing humility is a good thing. Sacrificing oneself for others and not looking for one's own importance is quite a good thing. Why? Because we're in the middle of a war, so if you're in the middle of the war, who cares if you're important or not? If you're receiving bombs coming down on you, you're like, who cares if other people think you're great or not, if you're sort of seen as having high status or not? Who cares? You're in the middle of the war, you just want to survive. You just want to live another day. So in those times, there's a sort of revival of humility and self-sacrifice, a revival of, okay, this is something good, this is something we should aspire to do and have. But then social media appeared, and social media kind of shifted that again towards people suddenly wanting to look great on camera and wanting to have many followers and wanting to be seen, and it became quite image sort of focused. But then social media shifted again. People got tired of that and saying, this is rubbish. Like they see all the celebrities, how their lives are like going down the hill. They don't live great lives. You look at celebrities and people are like, I don't really want to be like that. And it sort of shifted towards people now thinking, oh, we don't want that. We want something more authentic, something more real. So humility changes all the time, how much we like it or don't like it. But the reality is that we live under sort of two big realities. One is the reality of God, the creator of the universe, and what he's sort of said about us, what he's done for us. And the other thing is the reality of what we live in our daily lives. And if we look at the God perspective, what does God say about us? He says, we are worth his son dying for us, so he's giving us high value. We are worth speaking to us, teaching to us, forming us. So he gives us a real high value. But also the reality of our life is we recognize that we are very flawed. And if you don't see that in yourself, then maybe humility is a talk for you. But we realize that we are flawed and we see our mistakes. And if we live looking inwardly all the time, we will start thinking very lowly about ourselves, and we stop seeing how God sees us. So the invitation for us today is to start seeing ourselves as God sees us, recognizing our flaws, recognizing our mistakes, but actually then moving towards being more humble. What if by the end of 2025 we were more humble than what we are today? Is that sort of part of the goals for the year? If you think sort of what's the goals for the year, it's sort of losing weight, achieving something in your career, and then is being more humble part of your challenge for this year? And I hope by the end of today, you'll end up saying, my challenge for the year is I want to be more humble. I want to be more like Jesus. But before that, let's have a little game. So this is a phrase from a song. Let's see who can guess what song it is. If you've guessed it, don't shout it out. Pick up your hand. Ooh, someone's been looking at social media and seen this already. No? Sorry, no, pick your hand. Have you guessed it already? Who else? For everyone to see, as nice, humble people, pick up your hands. So, can someone shout it out? Never gonna give you up. Did you get it? It's the opposite word. The opposite of always is never. Coming. And so how does the song go, Hannah? Now everyone, never gonna? Never gonna? Never gonna? Never gonna? Say goodbye. I don't got it here. Never gonna tell a lie and hurt you. And I love that like, it's quite a silly song, but it actually reminds us of what God does for us. He never tells us a lie. He's never going to leave us alone. He's never going to let us down. He's never going to make us cry. He's never going to say goodbye. And that's why we are standing on solid ground. That's why we can sort of walk barefoot and stand on a ground and say, I don't need anything else. I don't need any other recognition, because I'm standing on this solid ground. It loves me so much that he gives himself on a cross and can sing this song, as Hannah beautifully did for us. And today we're looking, especially at the beginning of the year, a bit of like what's the vision, or where are we going this year? What's a verse for the year? What are we going to work on this year? And to be honest, I prayed a lot about this, and I came up with all these like really encouraging verses about how God will do great things, and I'm sure He will. But I felt God bring me back and back to talk about humility, to look at humility, and to look at us as humble people. And there's many good reasons why. But before we go into that, I'm going to just pause for a bit and remind us what is our vision, what's our strategy. Can anyone think of what's our strap line as a church? Can anyone look up? So this is our sort of strap line, which is basically our strategy. It's being with Jesus, which is one of our big priorities. So it's focused on prayer and worship. It's becoming like Jesus, is being formed into a likeness of Jesus, and doing what Jesus did, which is going out in mission. That's who we are, that's who we want to be, that's who we want to become. And our culture, the culture we're wanting to create, is with our values, which you can see over there as well. So it's nice big reminders of who we are, what we want to do, is we value community, we value joy, we value encouragement, we value authenticity, and we value adventure. And think of a humble person. A humble person, what values would a humble person reflect? Would he or she be someone who values community, who values other people? With someone who brings joy to other people? With someone who isn't that proud, who can just encourage everyone and say, what a great job, continue doing this? Would it be someone who's authentic, who can look at their own flaws and say, okay, I'm not very good at this, I'm all right at this, I'm good at that, but is really authentic? And who is up for an adventure, because they don't need to gain anything. They don't need to gain status. They don't need to gain recognition. They're up for an adventure. So all our values, and nearly our strapline, reflect a humble person. And that's who we want to become this year. So just a reminder of the verses from the last 2 years. For 2023, our verse was Habakkuk 3, which is one of my favorites. It says, Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Repeat them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. Our verse for last year was Psalm 63. You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water. And this verse has a lot to do with being with Jesus, doesn't it? A lot of sort of prayer, of hunger, desire. And when we move to 2025, I think these verses should still stay with us. It's not that we're saying, okay, now we've done this, we've hungered, we thirst for God, now let's ditch this and go for the next thing. It's actually we are building on it. And for this year, we want to become more like Jesus. And the verse for this year is Ephesians 4:2. And it's a very simple verse. It says, be completely humble and gentle. Be completely humble and gentle. It's not saying be a bit more gentle, be completely. And if Ephesians 4 is in the middle of Ephesians. So Ephesians is a book that Paul wrote, and it's quite a big book with really interesting things. But this verse lies exactly in the middle, and it lies between two big chunks of Ephesians. So the first bit of Ephesians tells all about God's story, the gospel, what God did for us. Jesus died for us. He talks about all of that, everything that God has already done for us. And Ephesians 4-6, you can't really read it. It doesn't really matter if you can see the screen. But it just gives you this idea. The second bit of Ephesians is all about our story. What do we do with this? How do we react to the beauty of what God has given us? So God's given us the gospel. And the second bit is what do we do with it? So the connection is this therefore in between. And this is what Ephesians 4 says. As a prisoner for the Lord, then I urge you to live a life worthy of your calling, the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. And this being completely humble and gentle, who else talks about being humble and gentle? Other than Paul, who spoke about being humble and gentle? How is Jesus described in the gospel? Jesus was described as being humble and gentle. And this is what Jesus says. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. So Jesus describes himself once, and he describes himself as being gentle and humble. And the invitation for us is to become gentle and humble. So I think the challenge I want to give you for this year is do you want to be formed by Jesus to be more humble and gentle? Do you long to be more like Jesus? Do you long to be more grounded in the confidence of who you are and who he says you are, and less interested in your own self-importance, less interested in your status, less interested in what others might think of you? So this is our verse. Maybe speak to the person next to you and, sorry, this is really uncomfortable. If you're an introvert, you're like hating me right now. You can just stay quiet and speak to your ChatGPT if not. But just speak to the person next to you and think, do you like being around humble people, and what is it that makes them interesting? I'm going to give you 2 minutes to think about that. 2 minutes. Do you like being around humble people, and what is it that you like about them? All right, let's come back. So, I'm sure we all like being around humble people, or most of us probably like being around humble people. They're like very attractive to be around with because they make us feel good, don't they? They make us feel loved. They make us feel valued. They make us feel like we are important. Wouldn't it be lovely to be part of a church family of humble people, where you come in and it's full of humble people who make you feel valued and loved and important and heard and seen? Because that's what humble people make us feel. And actually, if we become humble or more humble, then we can do that with others. And that's a very attractive community to be part of. And that's the community of the people who follow Jesus. That's part of the most attractive things, or I think the most attractive thing for me about Jesus is his humility. Like, of course, Jesus is powerful. Of course, if he's the Son of God, he can create things and make miracles, walk on water, rise the dead, make the blind see. Of course, he's created the universe. How can you create the whole expansion of the universe and not do those things? But what's mind-blowing is that he's humble. What's mind-blowing is that he's so different to the world around us. And I think as a Christian community, as a group of people who follow Jesus, that's the thing we can offer the world that's so special, is a group of people who are so confident in who we are in God, that we don't have the insecurity of having to be seen or recognized or applauded or seen by others. And as I was looking at humility, I was looking at the original Greek word, and the best translation I got, or explanation of the word, is this one. It says, humility is a modest view of one's importance. Isn't that quite nice? Like, isn't it lovely if the Prime Minister came in and just sat here and couldn't care less of how important he is. He just wants to sit down and worship with us. That's what humility is. It's a modest view of one's importance. So it's not weakness, it's not hating yourself, it's not resenting others, it's not being a doormat so everyone can step on. That's not humility, but humility is recognizing who we are and not giving too much importance to our own importance. So I asked a few people who I think are humble to tell me what they thought about humility and what did they see in humble people. And I'm not going to name them, but these are some of the replies I got. Someone said, being humble is recognizing that your value isn't defined by being good or bad at something. Someone else said, humble people are just people who really trust Jesus and depend on him. Someone said, it's people who have achieved things for the community, but it's not about them, and they don't draw attention to themselves. They encourage others and genuinely enjoy and celebrate other people's success. It doesn't matter if their contribution is recognized or not. And I think the best reply I got, and if you didn't get the best and I send you an email, sorry, you're not the best at replying to this, but you're humble enough to receive an email. So you're sort of top, but not top 3. And this is what she said. I thought, like, it's quite unexpected because she replied quite long, but I really enjoyed what she said. So bear with me, I'm going to read her reply. I would say it's someone who treats all people with the same care and respect, and is the same person in all situations, not looking down on certain people or putting others on pedestals and revering them too much. Everyone they meet is seen as a precious human being who has much to offer to society. It is someone who is happy to do any work in God's kingdom that he assigns to them, whether it is seen as something great or something very lowly by society. Nothing is beneath them and nothing is above them if God calls them to do these things. They are also ready to respond to anything that God calls them to. It is someone who is at ease with being wrongly judged and doesn't try to defend themselves for their own sake, but may do so if God guides them to set the record straight. It is someone who knows himself and loves himself fully, who deeply appreciates all that they have been given and sees the preciousness of their own life and all that they are called to do in God's kingdom. They also are able to love others, deeply appreciating all that they are, despite their obvious flaws, and all their actions towards these people are prayerfully guided and aimed to helping them. So it's quite a big thing, being humble. It's quite a big challenge. It's quite a high bar. But it is a bar we should aim for. And if we're like super proud and we're down here, if you're like the most arrogant person in the world and you're down here, there's such a journey to be humble. But it's such a beautiful journey because people are attracted to humble people. People like being around humble people. I enjoy being around humble people. Do you enjoy being around humble people? Yes. So it's so worth kind of going on that journey and working on ourselves and working on our own insecurities and working on our pride and working on our need to be recognized and working on our need to win arguments and to be the one who's right. Because being humble is so powerful, not only for us, but for others. And the great C.S. Lewis said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And Tim Keller sort of quoted him back and said, humility is actually a daily decision to be unimpressed with yourself. I love that. It's a daily decision to say, I don't need to impress myself, thinking of yourself less. St. Augustine said, it was pride that changed angels into devils. It is humility that makes men as angels. And Jonathan Edwards, which we looked at a bit in our revival series, he says, nothing sets a person so much out of the devil's reach as humility. So very quickly, how can we achieve or work on being more humble? And I think being humble has to do with being grounded on the truth, on reality. And I was thinking, like, why was Jesus so humble? Like, why, being like the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, did he choose to be humble? I think because he was so above status. Like, why would Jesus, who created the universe, care what a Pharisee thought of him? Like, why would one person in the middle of history, he knows billions of people, why would he care about that if that person thinks he's a lunatic or he is wrong in front of the law? If he is Jesus, the creator of the universe. Like, it's a bit like me, I'm playing Legos a lot in the last 2 weeks with my kids, and we create different things. And imagine if that little Lego person thinks, I don't like you, you're not my creator, or that Lego person is saying, you're not that important. What do I care? It's just a little Lego thingy. Like, why do I care so much why would I care about their opinion? Especially because some of them are Minecraft zombies, so I don't really care about Minecraft zombies' opinions. But it's like, if you look at it, of course, why would Jesus care about the opinion of a group of people who thought he was wrong when he was coming to save the universe, like save the whole of mankind, billions of people? Why would he care what those 50 Pharisees around him were saying and criticizing him? He wouldn't, because he knew he had a higher purpose. Why are people humble during wars? Why do people become more humble and less interested in their own self-importance? Because there's a higher purpose. Like, if you're being bombarded in the World War and you need to survive, and then you'll give all your metal to build bullets, probably is not what I should be saying in a church, but if that's where you're at, then you become more humble, more self-sacrificial, more interested in the community than in your own status, because it's a bigger purpose. You're just trying to survive. And as Christians, we live in a bigger narrative than our daily jobs, than our sort of friendship group, if we are seen as important, than the acceptance of our parents, of our career choices or life choices. Like, we live in a much bigger narrative. We're part of the God of eternity's purposes. He's building his kingdom and he invites us to be part of it. We're part of something so much bigger. And like, who cares what other people might think of us if we are part of that grand narrative? If we realize that at the end of the day, we're going to spend eternity with God, then who cares if someone doesn't like us, or if someone looks down at us, or someone like in my job as a football analyst, someone said like, how ridiculous is it that someone could believe that Jesus could walk on the water? And I was there. I was like, oh, that hurt. He knew I was a Christian, and he knew I went to church. But like, who cares if he thinks I'm believing a fantasy? Like, I'm part of something much bigger. My purpose is much bigger than the opinion of one person in my workplace. It's so much bigger. The second thing to be able to be humble is recognizing our identity, who we are. We are the ones who Jesus died for on the cross. We are valued by him. We are loved by our Creator. And Jesus knew perfectly who he was, and that's why he was humble. Philippians 2 says, Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death in a cross. Why? Because he knew his purpose was bigger. He knew who he was. He didn't care if he was humiliated by a few like little human beings. Like, he's much bigger than that. What he was coming to do was so much bigger and so worth it that he was willing to become a man and to serve people and to die on a cross for them. So we are humbled by understanding that we are part of a bigger purpose, by understanding who we are as sons and daughters of God. And therefore, how can we become more humble? And that's a really hard question. It's by being intentional about it. We're intentional about so many things, but not about becoming like Jesus as much as we should, I think. I was mind blown by a podcast about parenting. And the whole thing they talk about it's called intentional parenting. So it's all about how to be more intentional with your parenting. And one of the first talks I heard from them was, what's your plan as a parent you've got your kids for 18 years at home, how are you going to sort of equip them to go out into the world, to follow Jesus, to have good character, to be humble, gentle, kind, to treat others well? I was like, I've got no plan. I've sort of been winging it. I've got plans for so many things, but I haven't really thought of a plan for this at all. I've just sort of went with the flow. But I've had plans with so many other things. And this is probably my most important task. And I haven't really sat down to make a plan for it. And being like Jesus, being humble and gentle, should be one of the main things we want to do. Because it's better for us, it's better for others. It's what Jesus called us to do. Jesus doesn't call us to be believers only, to believe that he died for us on the cross. He calls us to be followers and apprentices and disciples who become more like him. So we need to be intentional if we want to be humbler by the end of this year. So my challenge for you is, for this year, if being humble is so good, it's better for us, better for God, then why not be intentional about ending this year more humble than you are today? Why not work on your own self and your own insecurities to be able to be grounded on God and end 2025 being more humble? So that's a challenge for us as a church. That's a challenge for you. I'm going to invite the band to come up. And shall we stand? And let's ask God to change us. Let's ask God to transform us, to be more humble and gentle as he is. God, we can do our bit and we can try and change, but we need you to change us. We need you to assure us who we are and be grounded on your love. We need you to change our pride and our insecurities. We need you to help us let go of stuff that we hold on to and be freer in you. So I pray, Lord, that you would come and meet with us now. You would come and change us now. Come and give us a strategy as to how we can be more humble come and change those insecurities and those things in ourselves. We ask that you would change us. In Jesus' name, amen.